If you've seen one of my other videos of my top 10 best cars for under £3,000, you might want to just skip this bit because the information's all the same. If you haven't seen it, then I would highly advise that you just watch this intro bit because it has a lot of useful information that you should take into consideration when buying your car. Hey everyone, welcome to the MIA log, and in this series of what car is best to buy for under £3,000, we're going to touch on best cars for bachelors and bachelorettes, best cars for families, and best starter cars. Depending on which video you're watching right now, the rest of the links will be in the description below. Before we get started with the episode, the first thing I want to mention is a few minimum standards when it comes to searching for a car. Now, me personally, I've owned myself, meaning I've bought and sold with my own money, over 50 cars. And if I take into consideration the amount of cars that I've got, including with the whole businesses giving me cars, my company that I work with giving me cars, if I include all those as well, I've had over 100 cars in total in the space of 12 years now. Now with that, I've had many experiences of fixing, repairing my cars, doing my own modifications, doing my own fixes to issues that I've had, and so on. So I would say I'm pretty much established when it comes to used car industry, and I'm trying to be more into the new car industry. But for now, I want to share the knowledge that I have in the used car industry and how you should be going about buying your used car. Now, before we get started with the actual episode, there are some minimum standards I want to share with you, which you should always take into consideration when looking for your car. The first thing you need to think about before choosing your car is what's going to be the main purpose of the car. Are you going to be using it in town journeys majority of the time, or are you going to be using it on the motorway majority of the times? For my American viewers out there, motorway is highway. This will also apply to you. Are you using it in town or on the highway majority of the times? Depending on where you're using your car majority of the time, should heavily depend on what car you're buying in terms of whether it's a petrol or a diesel car. Now that's because if you buy a diesel car and you're using it majority of the time in town, you're going to mess up that engine very quickly. And in newer diesel cars, they have something called a DPF, which is a diesel particulate filter. Now if you use that for a long period of time in town journeys, that filter is going to get clogged up. It's like having oil go through this filter and then it dries up over time and it just becomes thicker and thicker and thicker, and then it just messes the whole thing up. And that to replace is a lot of money, over £1,000 in the UK. And it's not so simple to clean up either if you wanted to just clean the engine out. I've had friends that have had DPF issues and we've gone for long journeys just to try clear it out, and none of that helped. So make sure before buying your car, you decide whether you're going to be using it majority of the time in town or whether it's going to be on the motorway most of the time. If it's on the motorway, diesel is your best friend. If it's in town, then petrol is your best friend. And the downside of having a petrol car for someone that uses it majority on the motorway is that you don't get the best fuel economy available. So that's the first step, deciding what fuel type you're getting for your car, depending on how you're going to use the car. The second step is once you find the car, what you should be doing before even going to view the car. So for the second step, this is mainly for the UK. I'm not sure if there's something like it in America. If there is something like this in America, then please someone from America leave me a comment, let me know that there is something like it. For the UK, this is a free service you can use. Just go to Google, type in MOT checker, go to the Gov.uk website, type in the registration of the car, and it will give you a whole history breakdown of that car's MOT. Now this is very important because it will tell you how many miles that car has done every year, what the car's failed on in its MOT testing, and it will tell you if the owner's been getting the car fixed regularly. Now here's a few things to watch out for. If you see a car that has no advisories at all in its MOT test after test after test, chances are that car's getting a dodgy MOT done. Second thing to watch out for when you are buying a diesel car, if you see that each year that the mileage isn't that high when they're getting the MOTs done, that most likely means they've been doing low mileage each year, meaning they're probably doing town journeys. This means the DPF is probably going to be messed up and you don't really want to go for that car. So in this case, when you go to diesel cars, the higher the mileage, depending on how old it is usually a better thing. It means that the engine was run properly, the DPF got a good clear out, and the MOTs were done in time. And that will give you a clear indication of whether that's a good diesel car to buy or not. So that's a top tip for anyone looking for a diesel car. Make sure that the mileage isn't too low. On average, you're looking at about 12,000 miles a year for a diesel car, and for a petrol car, you're looking for about less than 10,000 miles a year. On a diesel car, if you have anything over 12,000 miles a year, then it's all good. That means that car's getting a lot of motorway journeys in. That, or they're a cabbie and they've just been going around town a lot of times. But majority of the time, the chances are that they have been doing a lot of motorway journeys. So if you see a diesel car that's over 10 years old and has under 100,000 miles on the clock, avoid. And that was basically the third part of that second step, making sure you analyze that data properly and making sure you get a good car and that's not been kind of abused in a way in terms of the engine use. So without wasting any more time, let's get onto the main video. Before we get fully started, I just wanted to put a bit of information out there because prices have changed since I actually made this document. So just to give you an idea, I actually made this document in, no, that's the last modified date. Let's go into properties, details. There we go, created. So I actually made this document on the 15th of November 2020, right? And prices have changed dramatically since then. So the prices you see that I'm going to put up right now may not be the same, but I will go on Auto Trader with you in this episode and we're going to find out some good examples, or if you can even buy the same car still for the same money, or if you should be avoiding this car now because the value's gone too high. So without wasting any more of your time, let's get onto it. So in this episode, we're looking at best cars to buy for under 3K for bachelors and bachelorettes. Now there are some criteria here for this list. 1, it has to look good. 2, it has to be somewhat reliable. And 3, it has to look good. Yes, look good is on there twice because it's a bachelor bachelorette's car. You're buying this car to look good in it, right? So let's kick things off with the list. And as I mentioned in the beginning, prices may be somewhat off now, so we're going to quickly look at it and see what we can get. So here we've got BMW 3 Series 2004. I found one with a 2.5 litre engine with the sports trim, 103k miles on the clock. You guys can read all the rest. Now the key thing is, can you still buy this car for that same price, and are there any good examples available? Now I'm not going to go through my entire search. I'll just pick out the best bits for you and chop and trim my edit. Now I am using it on my phone because I find using Auto Trader on my phone is much easier than using it on the website. It's just much more user-friendly experience. So we're looking for a BMW 3 Series. Go to more filters and we want the max price to be 3 grand. Body type, we want it to be a coupe. Not too fussed about the fuel type. Again, decide whether you're doing long journeys or town journeys and base your purchase on that. And then search. Now we've got some cars over here. So in this case, in this scenario, the price of this car has actually gone down a bit. So you can actually even get the newer model now. So yeah, this car still passes the check. You can still buy one for under 3 grand, and there are plenty, well, there are 55 examples available for you to buy from, and you might even be able to get a newer model. It's just going to have a bit of high mileage on it, which isn't a bad thing. Again, do the MOT check, see if it's worth getting. Right, now moving on to number 9 on the list, we have the Audi A5. Now I found a 2009 example back then with a 2.7 TDI engine. Now, the reason I picked the 2.7 TDI engine on this one is because if you go for the 2.7 or above, then you actually get the dual exhaust pipe, which is what you want. It looks much better than having the single exhaust pipe or the dual exhaust pipe on one side. Right, so let's see if there's still one available. So we're gonna go to more, we're gonna go to the make. We want the Audi A5. And the main thing that we want to set on here is the engine size. We want the minimum 2.7 litre diesel engine, so we're going to search that. Sorry, the reason my face just did that is because this car that you see right here, the one I'm highlighting right now, that was up for 2 grand less, literally about 2 weeks ago. So I'm surprised to see this put up to 6.5 grand now. So this is what I was talking about, by the way. If you get for the 2.7 litre diesel engine, you get the 2 exhausts in the rear there. One filter that I forgot to put on is the 3 grand, which is the main purpose of this. So, ooh. Okay, so it looks like you can't get the 2.7 for under 3 grand anymore. That's one of the things that's gone out the list. How about if we get rid of that minimum engine size? Nope. So it looks like my number 9 spot has been removed completely. 2 years ago, you was able to get an Audi A5 with a 2.7 litre diesel engine with 94,000 on the clock, which isn't bad at all. And again, that's not where you want the mileage to be for the diesel car, but it would have been all right for you to bite the bullet and take the risk. So that's out the list. So someone tell me, what would you put in the number 9 spot? Right, let's move on to number 8. What's in my number 8 spot? Jaguar X-Type. Now, this is going to pull up mixed feelings because some will look at it as a granddad car, but some will look at it as a sign of sophistication. Because personally, I think these cars look good, right? Especially if you go for the sports or the sovereign trim. So let's find out if we can actually find one of those now. So Jaguar, we're going for the X-Type. So we can actually get the sovereign trim. Now, ideally, you want the sovereign trim because it's their top trim level. And in this green as well. See, this just looks nice. To me personally, I think this looks nice. Especially in that green, it just shouts sophistication. But I think it looks really nice. It's got a good engine inside it, and you get loads of extra bits inside the car as standard. So for example, if we just zoom in over here, you can see that you've got heated seats, you've got sat nav. The leather in this car is beautiful. It's hard wearing, and it just, to me personally, I think this deserves the number 8 spot in my list because of the amount of things you get in it, and as a bachelor or bachelorette, I think this is more of a bachelor's car rather than a bachelorette's, but you know, boss lady, you can still drive this as well, and I think you would rock it nicely. And again, you get loads of things in it, and for £2,295, that's a bargain. That's an absolute bargain. And again, the MPGs and everything you get out of this car is amazing. On the motorway, you're going to get 62.1 MPGs, which is great. And this dealership actually has a high rating as well. Only 9 reviews, but I'd highly recommend this car. So let's move on to number 7 on my list, and that's the Mercedes CLK 2008 2.1D. So that's the diesel version. Again, majority of the cars I've got listed here are diesels because personally for myself, I do long distance driving. So this is why I've kind of based it more around myself. But again, cater the search to your needs. And then we want to go to CLK. We want the coupe version. You don't really want the convertible in this one because the material that they use for their fabric used to wear out super quick. They've got a sports version available over here, but we're just going to go for the avant-garde. Let's go for the newest model first because you want the facelifted version of this car. You don't want the non-facelifted version. It does not look nice. And it's good to see that this car is still available and still within that £3,000 budget. And again, I think it's a very nice looking car, and you get loads of extras inside it as well. One of the nice things about this car is that it's got a pillarless frame. That means you can actually put the 4 windows down and it's just one pillarless open frame, which looks really nice on this car. So backing up and then moving on to my number 6 spot on the list, the VW Golf. Now I'm not going to go into this one because this one's pretty self-explanatory. The Golfs are pretty much the best all-rounders that you can get. They're cheap to fix, their parts are cheap, they're widely available because they're everywhere, because they're part of the VW group. They're the main part of the VW group. If you don't know what the VW group is, it's basically Volkswagen, you've got Seat, you've got Skoda, you've got Bugatti, Lamborghini, the list goes on. The majority of the cars you see on the road are mainly probably VW group. But yeah, let's move on to the number 5 on the list. The number 5 on the list is a Ford Focus. I don't know why that list isn't bigger, so let's make that bigger. Now this car I really like. I think the look of it and everything is beautiful. So let's quickly have a look at what we can still get in this. So if I go to make, we're gonna go to a Ford. Why is it doing that for? Let's get rid of that because we don't want it to be a coupe. But what we do want is Focus. And then we want the Z-Tech S. You want the Z-Tech S trim, and I'm going to show you why. Right, now hit that search button. Now the reason you want that Z-Tech S trim is because you get those nice alloys with it, and you see that bumper, you get that nice bumper with it. It just comes with a nice kit on it. Even the rear looks nice. If you don't get the Z-Tech S trim, then you don't get these little extra bits like the spoiler, that Lexus style rear lights, and those alloys. So I think if you're gonna get the Ford Focus, you have to get it in the Zetec S trim, and it's well deserving of my number 5 spot, because I think if you have this car, it is something that you can stand out in that trim. Not only that, it's super reliable, it's cheap to maintain, it's cheap to fix, and it's an economical car to drive as well, as long as you're not driving it in town. Because as you can see here, if you get the diesel version, you only get 29.7 mpgs, which isn't great, especially with the fuel prices that we are having right now. Now, moving on to my number 4 spot, it is the Suzuki Grand Vitara. Now, this, some people will probably disagree with me on this, but the reason I've got the Suzuki Grand Vitara on here is mainly because of the amount of space you get in this car. If you're a bachelor, bachelorette, and you like to travel, you want to go places, having a little mini 4x4 is going to be such a nice thing to have. Now, the thing is, can we still get one for under 3 grand? The trim level, I didn't really make a note of it because to me, I didn't need to, but you want to go from beyond 2006, because if you get something that's before 2006, you're going to get this thing over here. And personally, it's ugly. You don't want this, right? So you want to get 2006 onwards, which gives you this shape, and I think this looks much better. It looks like a mini Land Rover, you know, the Freelander. It looks like a mini Freelander basically, but it's more reliable, and I think as someone that's single or they don't have a family yet, this is a great car to have in terms of it gives you a nice ride height, it gives you a very big spacious car that you can literally travel with anywhere. And I just think it's a nice car to have, especially if you're someone that's living that single life where you don't have a family yet and you like to travel a lot. Just take into consideration though, this isn't a very economical car. It looks good and you can modify it to look amazing, and it's easy to modify. But the main reason I put it on my list is because of its reliability. You could argue this car should be in my family list, but in all honesty, this version that I'm showing you right now isn't the one that I would advise the single person to get. The one I advise the single person to get, or the person that doesn't have a family yet, is, where's it gone? There's another filter you need to add on here. You want to get the 3-door version. This little mini SUV, I think, just looks cute, lovely, and it's just something about it that just makes you smile. And again, it's the reliability of it. So if you're someone that's not in a family, having something that's this reliable is something great to have as well. I don't know what it is, but for me, this car's in number 4 because it's just cute. I mean, look at it. It just looks nice. It's got ample space inside it, and it just gives you a nice ride height. And again, the reliability is one of the key factors of this thing. And I think as a bachelor or a bachelorette's car, it's a very bossy car to be in, especially if you do little minor modifications like tint the rear windows, tint those front headlights, get some nice alloys on it. It'll even put a nice sound system inside it, which is easy to do in this car. And you've got yourself a really nice bachelor or bachelorette's car. Now let's move on to my number 3 spot. Ooh, they got it in green. I've got a thing for green cars. I love green cars. It has to be this green though. It can't be like a nasty bright green. It has to be a deep green. And let's move on to my number 3 spot. And in number 3, we have the Toyota Celica. Now, I've actually owned about 3 of these. And the biggest tip I can give you about this car is make sure you're topping up the oil. Because I've actually destroyed one of these cars by not topping up the oil. And it drinks oil a lot. So make sure if you are getting one of these cars, you do top up the oil regularly, or keep an eye on the oil regularly. So let's see if we can still get a Toyota Celica. We should be able to, because I remember buying one for about £1,100. But the one I've got listed over here was a very good example when I was checking it back then. Right, so let's see what we can get. Now you have to be cautious when you're buying these, right? Because you're going to have 2 different models. You've got the VVT-Li, and then you just got the VVT-I. Now if you go for the VVT-Li, you're going to get the one with the spoiler in the back, which also has the extra BHP and everything inside it as well. So it does look better, and it is a car that will hold its value higher than the normal VVT models. But the VVT models are fine. I've never personally owned a VVT-Li version, but I've owned 3 VVT cars. But also you need to remember that there'll be versions of this car available or that are being sold without that little spoiler on the back. Now to me personally, without that little spoiler, the car just doesn't look the same. This car is super reliable as long as you make sure you keep an eye on the engine oil. That's the main thing I can advise you about this car. Other than that, this car was super lovely to have, super lovely to drive. The first one I did have, like I said, I kind of blew the engine by not checking on the engine oil, but boy, was that car fun to own. I had it back in university, and it would literally just get so many admiring looks, and I had that car down to the T. I mean, I knew how to control that car with ease. Handbrake turns, drifting, you name it, I was able to do it in this car, and it's just a lovely car to handle. So I could highly recommend this car to anyone, but again, as I mentioned many times now, just check that engine oil. Now, moving on to my number 2 spot is the Hyundai Coupe 2009. The trim has to be the S3. Now, the reason it has to be the S3 is because you get it's basically a facelift. That's all it is. So let's just quickly go into here, Hyundai Coupe, and then you want to make sure that you've got the S3 version. If you search that, it's a great looking car. It's a very reliable car as well. And now these go for super cheap considering the mileage that they're on as well. And that's because they're not very well known cars. Not a lot of people know about these, but I think they're beautiful looking cars and the interiors are beautiful. But the main thing that bugs me about this car is literally just the placement of the gear stick and how it's always offset. No matter which one of these I've owned 2, but no matter which one of those 2 I've owned, or whichever one I look at whenever I'm checking out these cars, the gear's always offset, and I don't know why that is, and it really bugs me. But I think the car looks beautiful. Now, if you go for the 2-litre and above engine, you do get the dual exhaust pipe, and again, it looks amazing. Top Gear done a video on a much older version of this, and people were saying that it looks like a Ferrari. They were complaining about it, which I don't see why that's a thing you complain about. But yeah, I think it's a great car. The car has a great engine inside it in terms of reliability. In terms of, if you go for some of the older versions, there's a 2.7-litre petrol engine, which sounds like a lot, but really it just consumes a lot of fuel but doesn't go really fast. But this one is my top pick because it's the 2-litre engine and it offers you good economy as well. But if we have a quick look at the interior, the leather inside here is actually pretty decent. It's hard wearing, but as you can see, this is the one thing that bugs me, guys. For some reason, that gear stick is always off and they never sit right, which is the only thing that bugs me about this car. But other than that, the car is beautiful, the car is super reliable, and it's a lovely car to have and own. As you can see here, the version over here, you've got heated seats, and you've even got little indicators over here, or dials here, that makes it feel a little bit more sporty, although I never knew what they actually do. Oh, one's an MPG gauge. You know what? Every single time I owned one of these cars, I never actually looked at the right. I just used to look at the needles going up and down, and that was enough for me. Those are the good old earlier days. Now, moving on to my number 1 spot. On this list. The car that I've actually went out and bought last year because it was still worth under £3,000, and I found a very good example of it. I've actually still got it to this date, and I'm actually making a YouTube series of modifying it and doing other things to it. So if you're interested in any of that, then I'll put the link up at the top left over there where you can check out what I've currently done. And you can actually follow me for my journey if you want to as well. But the number 1 spot in this list for bachelors and bachelorettes that I can recommend in this list is the Honda Civic Type S trim. So in that number 1 spot, we've got the Honda Civic Type S, and like I said, I've actually gone out and bought one of these because I feel confident in this list, and I feel like this is the number 1 car you can buy for under £3,000 in terms of reliability, economy, and presence. The only downside to this car is the ride comfort. But if you can bear with that, it's not that it's gonna mess up your back or something like that. It's bearable, but a lot of people will complain about the ride comfort. It is hard compared to a lot of other cars that I've driven, but you can bear with it, and honestly, it's a beautiful car to have, it's a beautiful car to own, and it's a super reliable car. Just make sure you stay on top of its servicing. I have a cousin that's owned 2 of these cars. Due to him not looking after it, he managed to break 2 Honda Civics. Now that's almost unheard of. When you're driving down the road, you don't see Honda Civics broken down, unless you're him. So let's check if we can still buy a Honda Civic Type S for under £3,000. Oh, you can actually get some GTs. I've got the GT listed on my list. I've personally bought the Type S, not the GT version, but basically the GT gives you the option of the panoramic sunroof and power folding mirrors and rain sensing wipers. So since the GT's on my list, I'm going to select the GT on here and let's see what examples we have. Oh yeah, I've actually got this one listed over here for £2,000 that I found. But see, this is the thing. You can see that if you zoom in here, it's all kind of molded and the paint's coming off near the bottom. Yeah, that's coming through there. So it's a nice example, but you know you're gonna have to do some work when you buy this car. But for £2,000, it is pretty decent. The mileage is a bit high on it, but it's nice to know that you can still buy the Honda Civic Type S for very good money still. So that's it. That's my top 10 for when it comes to best cars for you to buy for under £3,000 for bachelors and bachelorettes. If you're interested in top 10 best cars to buy for under £3,000 for families or first-time drivers, then check out the links in the description below. If the links aren't there yet, that just means I haven't created it yet, but I am in the process. So please bear with me. Please support the channel by hitting that subscribe button, and I'll catch up with you all on the next one.